All right, well, welcome to the third session here, the PPN's Network-Wide Technology Committee. I'm joined by Miss Yvette Alba and Miss Miriam De Jesus. So hello, ladies, welcome to today's meeting. We're going to be covering the same items that we've covered at some of the other sessions, which is I'm going to be sharing my initial data that I've gathered on my technology walkthroughs at each campus and then get feedback from you. Then I'll share my initial thoughts around the technology integration plan for the network, and then also get your thoughts and feedback on that. Since I have an ops-focused audience today, I will also be talking a little bit more about the technology budgeting process, replacement cycles, some of the things that I don't necessarily speak about with teachers because it's not normally in their wheelhouse, or that they don't normally have as much desire around knowing all that back-end stuff, but I think that it affects the operations community more, so we'll be talking about that. So if you want to go ahead and bring up the graphic that I showed you, I'm just going to talk through it a little bit, and then I'd love to get your thoughts around two particular questions. So I'm just going to quick share my screen so that the viewers at home can see this particular graphic. So if you're looking at this, you'll notice that there are three columns that I've collected information around. The first column is just simply whether or not technology is being used in the classroom. And I just looked indiscriminately, right? So if there was any kind of technology being utilized, then that got a check mark in the yes column, right? So if you just take a quick look at this, it looks like at our best, about half of the classrooms are utilizing technology. And then at some of the lower usage cases, it ends up being about a quarter of the classrooms. Now, I've said this in the other two meetings, and I'll say this in this one as well. This is just a snapshot, right? I mean, I wasn't in any classroom for more than 5 to 10 minutes. So I realize that this is wholly inaccurate. It doesn't really give us a great picture of what actual tech use is going on, but that shouldn't be a reason to stop us from even taking a look, right? So this is a baseline. I'd like to do this a few more times. You know, that technology usage primarily was interactive projectors and interactive whiteboards, projecting a presentation from staff, right? And so it also ranged, though. There was some hearing devices that students used. There were Chromebooks and iPads that kids were using in the classroom, as well as different types of technology, document cameras, CD players, speakers, microphones that teachers were using to help deliver their content. So that's just to give you a general idea of what it is that I saw when I went around. What I want your feedback, Miriam and Yvette, on is the second and third column. So we look at the second column, and the question is around student engagement. So if we notice those numbers, they hover generally around just a little bit less than the total number of classrooms that were using tech. So if you look at Girls Prep Bronx Elementary, for instance, I visited 14 different classrooms. Of those 14 visits, 4 classrooms were using technology. Of those 4 classrooms, 1 of them was using technology in a way that students were really super engaged in that. So the question that I wanted to get from you all was, how would you define student engagement with regards to technology? So let me give you an idea of what it is that I was thinking when I originally started to do this, right? I started to think, well, if the kids have technology in their hands, then they're engaged.
Interactive, yeah.
Yeah, so which is kind of where I thought I started from, right? But then I'm not quite sure that that really gets at the entire picture, because just because you're holding an iPad, it doesn't necessarily mean you're engaged in the process. So I guess, do you guys think that this is something that we should be looking at? And if so, do you have any thoughts on how we could measure it?
Maybe like if they're able to use it independently, because be holding an iPad, but if someone is telling you what icons to select and exactly what to look at, then that doesn't really understand how it works.
That's an excellent point. One of the things that I'm looking at implementing, and I think you two will appreciate this, is I'm looking to implement tech helpers at every school. And depending on tech use in each grade or in each classroom, they'd basically be students that were empowered to assist other students in using the technology. Much to your point, you could be holding something, but if you don't necessarily know what to press, then you're not going to you're not really going to be that engaged in the learning task. So I think that'll be a good support for teachers, is to have students identified in each class that can help pass out the resources, collect them, and then ultimately help other students with whatever technology they're using. It could be a website URL, it could be steps to make sure that they can hear whatever's going on using headphones. What do you think about the tech helpers idea? Do you think that's something that we should look to replicate?
Yes.
So do you think that it should be something that is more like a one kind of crew for the entire school, or do you think that there should be a few members in each class that should be identified as helpers? Which way should we look to go?
I think just because our girls, so many of our girls are so young, it would be best if they're like
the older grades
in each classroom.
We can start with the older grades, and then like they can start teaching the younger ones.
But then when would they be pulled out of their instruction?
The older ones.
That's a really good idea. I think it makes sense to start older, but with older students. But you're right. Instructional time is coveted. Nobody wants to give that up in order to teach them. So your school doesn't have, I know some of our schools, particularly the middle schools, have after-school programs. What's the scope of the after-school program at Girls Prep Bronx Elementary?
We don't have
one. We have arts after school, but they focus on like music and visual arts.
All right. Who runs that?
Lenore and Katie Hopkins.
Okay. Well, I'll have a note for myself to follow up. Actually, I'm meeting with Lenore next week on the last session that we're having on this, and I'll ask her if there's maybe a way that we can incorporate kind of like a little training session for technology in there. So that might be one way to go ahead and assist teachers in implementing this. But it sounds like we like the idea. It's just finding the time to train the kids so that they can, in turn, help and support the teachers. That's going to be the biggest challenge, is finding the time. Okay. So the last portion of the grid that I want, the graphic rather, that I wanted to talk about, if I can redirect your attention back to the graphic, is the last column is really around this metric that I think is really important. So I want to get your thoughts on whether or not I should use this as a measure. The question is technology allowing something to happen in the classroom that otherwise couldn't happen? Right, so let me give you an example of this. An example of this is, we're all familiar with Skype and these online meetings, video conferences that we're using now, right? So one of the tools that classrooms use is Skype. And one of the things that they do is actually reach out to authors or other people in the community or in foreign countries to actually come and, quote, visit their classroom and provide a speech or give some kind of deliver some kind of content to the class. Technology is allowing that to happen, whereas you couldn't fly in an author on a school's budget from another country to come visit and give a talk to the classroom, right? So that's an example of something that technology allows to happen that otherwise couldn't. Another example is making a video. If you actually made a video of something that happened within, within the school environment, you can represent that in a way that it would be almost impossible to do without the use of technology. So do you two think that that is a good metric? Should we be looking at that as a way to measure technology usage?
I think so.
Yeah, like, is it enhancing, right, their experience in any way?
Because the other option is oftentimes what we see in a lot of schools is just kind of doing the same old thing. Like, instead of doing a worksheet on a physical piece of paper, you're just doing a worksheet online, which doesn't necessarily kind of challenge those thoughts. Right. So it seems like you guys are in agreement that this is a good metric, but I'd love to hear more.
Right, because it's what we're using it for. Like the girls, I remember, like, I don't remember if it was last year or the year before, they were actually like doing research on like different people, and like not a lot of them have that at home. So it's not just like doing a worksheet online on a computer. It's like learning how to use it, you know?
Yeah, you're bringing up a really good point. So the way that I look at tech integration, and this is where we can start kind of moving into the more ops side of things, is that I feel like there's two ways that we can utilize tech, right? One is for the actual content that you're trying to teach, right? So if you're trying to get across some math concept or an ELA concept or something in social studies or science, then there's that actual content around that subject area, right? 2 + 2 is 4, or the Lenape Native American tribe settled in this portion of America, right? So there's actual content specific to the subject. But then there's what you were, I think, getting out of that, which are the skills that you need to utilize with the tech to access that content.
Exactly.
There's typing, there's typing skills. There's ability to search online on the internet to determine reliable sources of information. There's ways in which you need to collaborate with teammates and classmates on projects and things like that. Mm-hmm. So I see some head nodding. Is that, am I synthesizing what you said accurately?
I was thinking.
Okay, then this is a good segue into me sharing with you all my kind of vision of my technology plan and what it started out as. So I'll go through this kind of quickly, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this as well. So let me know when you can see my screen.
Wait, I'm going back to you, right?
Yeah, go back to my to the window that had my face on there, and I'm sharing my screen with you. So let me know when you can see it.
Mm-hmm. 2-year plan.
Okay. Yes. So this is me being a Star Wars nerd, so please feel free to make fun of me. I wanted to be completely transparent. This is my 2-year plan when I very first started. So I was a month or two on the job 2 years ago, and this was my plan. So I wanted to share it and see how accurate I have been. So first, I'll let you read this statement here. So when the screen loads, you can go ahead and read this statement. I'll read it out loud for those watching the video. Technology is integrated into the heart of the instructional core. It will facilitate interactions among teachers, students, and curriculum, and allow each to accomplish their core objectives most efficiently. Students will use technology to harvest information, collaborate with one another, communicate ideas through published products, and develop the continually evolving skill set required to thrive in a 21st century world. So that's a lot. That's a lot of heavy stuff. But really, what I wanted to pull out of this was the items in that second paragraph. So we'll get into that a little bit more. But when I first started, I kind of looked at 3 basic areas, right? Systems that need to be in place for success, learning strategies for both those systems and other academic means, and then last is how are we focusing on students and their learning. So when you get into strategies, you start looking at these are the areas that I thought would be good for me to spend my time when I very first started, right? I thought there would be a good place online for teacher websites and professional development. I wanted to start up tech committees at each school and then have a network-wide tech committee. I wasn't really able to get it off the ground at each school, but you all are participating in the network-wide technology committee. Really what I wanted to focus on here, though, and get feedback on are what I'm calling my 4 pillars. The pillars of technology integration, which are a foundation from which people can utilize these ideas, teachers can utilize these ideas to help guide students in their use of technology. So the technology pillars, are you guys following along okay? Is this going too fast for you?
No.
Okay, good. So the 4 technology pillars start off with digital citizenship, right? Which is teaching the girls and boys around what does empathy look like in the digital world, right? Once you start posting comments and interacting with online content, you start to create a digital footprint. That's important for kids to learn because as you grow up, you're going to be followed by your online activity, right? Mm-hmm. What kind of impact does what you say and what you consume, what does that have on the world, right? So this is important, I think, for students to learn. The second pillar is around information harvesting. I remember when information was really easy to find on the internet, and the longer it's been around, the more stuff's on there, and it becomes difficult identifying what's reliable information and what isn't. Students need to learn how to compare and contrast and cite and reference information online. So this is a very important underlying philosophy and skill set that students need to be able to learn in order to be successful. The third pillar is around communication and collaboration. I mean, think about how many people you two communicate with on a given day. right? I mean, it's tons. You two are on a team within a team within a team, right? So people have to collaborate with one another and communicate. And I think that that's important to utilize technology to do that. I mean, imagine how much more difficult our jobs would be if we didn't have tech to help us do that, right? And the last pillar is around, I think this is very important, it's around content authoring, right? So what are you creating? What are we having students make using technology? Are they making anything? Are they just merely consuming? And this is what I'm trying to avoid, or at least with the plan anyway, is that if all you're using technology for is just to passively consume presentations and media, then I don't think that we've done our job as a technology committee, and I haven't done my job as the director to really kind of help shape the vision around what it is that we want kids to be able to do with our tech, right? So those are the 4 pillars. Before I move on, I just want to make sure that I didn't go too fast. Does that make sense to you all?
It makes sense.
And it's
So
very
again,
everyone's needs.
As I had these meetings before, I thought that these can be kind of vague. I mean, you did mention that they are specific. I think they are specific around kind of those particular areas, but really they don't list out like specific lessons that teachers are going to do, and they don't list out specific things that kids are going to do. So I think it's important to define them as that's why I titled them pillars, is that they're almost like foundational pieces that need to be in place for teachers and students to both successfully integrate technology. So I think it's important to understand that they are just those. They're foundational things that can be in place for really teachers to keep in mind. Like, how am I asking the kids to communicate, collaborate with one another? Is that an element of the project that I'm working on? What am I having the kids create? What am I having them make, right? Does my project have some kind of element of digital citizenship? Can I utilize this to help teach the kids what their footprint's going to look like, right? So I think these are good like guiding principles for when you're looking at integrating technology. So as I frame that, what are your thoughts on that?
We have a plan. It sounds like you have a plan, and I'm with Yvette because it does feel detailed, because we already know what should be happening and where we should be at that 2 years mark.
Yeah.
From an instructional standpoint, maybe to you it doesn't feel it isn't too detailed, but that's not really what we're looking at. You know, what the teachers are going to be, what it's going to look like in every classroom from the operational standpoint.
Well, you guys know from having supported the schools from and I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry. Did you have more to say?
Mm-hmm.
So you all know from having supported and continually supporting the teachers that all of these ideas can sound great, but you need to have equipment in place that works, and it needs to work consistently so that when teachers and students go to use it, that they don't run into errors. Some of the feedback that I got around this, well, let's take student accounts, for instance. So this will be interesting. I think you guys will have some interesting feedback on this. You know, when I originally created accounts for students, kindergarten, first, and second grade all have classroom accounts. There's a single account these are Google accounts, single account to access Chromebooks or any of the Google apps. But then third grade and up all have individual accounts. So I got some feedback from a teacher that said it would be really helpful if we created a class-by-class roster with the usernames and passwords for all of the kids, so that when the teachers went to go to log on the kids, that they would have one single place for all that information. That's not something that I had actually done. I had just given instructions around that and said, here's, you know, the OSIS number, you can look up their ID number within our student information system. And I thought that that was enough, but it appears that the teachers wanted a little bit more specificity around what their user accounts are for their kids. Does that make sense to you? And do you think that's a good way to go? And what else should we do to make sure teachers are prepared to utilize tech in the classroom?
So your instructions, you gave them instructions on how to go into eSchool and search for the information?
So that's a great follow-up question. No, I didn't. The student Google account was simply what I explained to you, but just in a single piece of paper, right? Like if you're in kindergarten, first or second grade, this is the nomenclature. It'll follow your namesake, and this is how it will appear, and this is the general password for that. Students, it will follow this nomenclature, first initial to first name plus last name, and then your password will be your OSIS number, which can be found in eSchool. That's pretty much what I said. So you're making me think I wasn't specific enough. So what else could I have added in there to make the form better?
OSIS number, probably not, because they don't work with their OSIS numbers regularly, so they may not even know what it looks like.
Yep. Good point. I didn't consider that. It's precisely why I'm having these meetings. So that suggestion by the teacher of making a per class sheet with all the accounts on it, you guys agree that that's a good way to go?
If it's using their OSIS number, yeah, because it's not something they use regularly or may even be familiar with.
So each kid has a different account?
Third grade and up, correct.
So it's like first name, last name, like that, like a login?
Exactly. Just like your email address, it's exactly the same for the kids.
So there was one for each grade?
I forget the class roster on eSchool showed their OSIS numbers.
I believe that it does. But if we're creating resources for the teachers, we can go ahead, I'll take care of this, to give the teachers a list of the accounts and all their passwords, which would be their OSIS numbers. If
they already have access to it, maybe the one-sheeter with a screenshot. Like, this is where you can find it. You have access to it. You probably didn't know it, but it's right here.
That's a good idea. I'm almost wondering, though, if it would be a better idea when you want other people to adopt something that you're asking them to do that they wouldn't necessarily otherwise do. I think my opinion, and I want your feedback on this, I think it makes sense to remove as many roadblocks as possible. So instead of saying, hey, you go into the system and click on this, and then there it is for you. If I just did it, I mean, it would take me obviously more time to do all of them than it would for them. But it's something that I'm willing to do because then it removes that additional roadblock. What do you think?
And where would it live?
Where would the sheet that I'm talking about creating, where would that live?
Yes.
So I'm thinking about creating a Google Doc that I would share with the teacher itself, the teacher and the co-teacher of that particular classroom, so that they'd have access to it online whenever they want. If they wanted to print it out, they could. But that's where I would have it live, would be on Google. What do you think?
That's helpful. And would all the teachers have access to all of the classroom's information, or will it just be specific to
Each class?
So that's a great question. I'll probably make the lists specific, obviously, to each class and share them with, specifically share them with the teacher and the co-teacher, but I'll make them available so that you can search. That way, if a specials teacher had a group of Chromebooks and wanted, so the idea, let me just back up and answer one of Yvette's questions, right? So the idea was that if you were in kindergarten, first or second grade, you're just too little to have your own individual account. It's just too confusing to log in as kindergartner, first initial, first name plus last name, and my individual OSIS number as my password. That's just too much for little ones. Mm-hmm. So that's why we decided to have a single, like Joan Gantz Cooney account for the entire class. That way the teacher knew it front ways and back ways, and then if the kids ever wanted to get on to one of the devices, they could easily just log on, right? No real issue. But then we don't want to have class accounts when you're in 5th grade, when you're in 8th grade, right? When you start to get older in school, you need to have your own account so that you can create your own documents, so that all of your resources and your portfolio, if you will, is tied to a specific individual account. So then the question was, when do you change over, right? At what point do you stop having the class account and you start having an individual account? So we started hovering around 2nd and 3rd grade. So after some back and forth, and it's interesting because understandably teachers were like, no, that sounds great, but I'd rather do the class account in my grade, because it's so at some point, some grade is going to have to take on that work of teaching the kids, okay, this is how you individually log onto your account. This is what it means. This is how you start to create things that are individual and specific to you. And that's a big lift at the beginning of the year. And understandably, teachers don't want to give up precious instructional time to go over that, right? So we landed on 3rd grade. So the idea is that 3rd grade and up have individual accounts, and that the longer the kids are using them, by the time they're in 4th grade, 5th grade, they will have memorized their OSIS number, they will have memorized their account, they will definitely know how to get into it, and then they can use it in middle school and beyond, right? That's the idea. So I want to move on, unless you guys have more thoughts on this, because I do want to pick your brains a little bit more on some of the ops stuff. And this is a great conversation around these accounts, because it's taken me the past 2 years to really think about this. Like, what's that going to look like for kids? Is it overkill? I mean, I started off saying every single kid should have their own account, and I quickly got pushback from the younger grades saying we're just never going to use those individual accounts. So I had to change my philosophy to meet the demand where it was, which made sense to me once the teachers kind of explained that. So now that I've explained the kind of kindergarten through 2nd grade and then 3rd grade on, does that kind of student account layout, does that make sense to you?
It makes sense. I mean, 3rd grade is also the first year when they start state testing. So the state believes they're old enough, right, for standardized tests. And I think that's a good age to start their individual accounts. Makes sense. The little ones, for sure, they can't.
I know. I've got kids myself, and sometimes I think like, it definitely is. Kids can be definitely too young to have to remember such kind of specific, steps in order to gain access to their accounts. So, okay, so I'm going to continue to share I'm going to go back to sharing my screen, and let me know when you can see it. So you might have to jump back over to the other screen there, Mirham. But I'm now displaying what I had come up with a few years ago around a hardware plan. Are you seeing this?
Yes.
So if you look, that same kind of student grouping, pre-kindergarten through 2nd grade, and then elementary school and middle school, I really kind of thought that tablets would be, this is again my thinking a few years ago, is that tablets would be best utilized in that early grade area, and then Chromebooks could be utilized in that 3rd grade up through middle school, and then also kind of not as heavy of an element, but having media desktops or media laptops. Typically, these tend to be Macintosh to allow for video editing, audio editing, doing some of the more creative work that you would do with computers.
In middle.
Yeah, starting in middle school. I mean, if we got a program that worked, I wouldn't be adverse to getting some of these higher end machines down in elementary school. But right now, I think that's overkill to spend, $2,000 on a computer for a 3rd grader to use. Not to say that a 3rd grader isn't capable of, churning out high quality work, but we should, crawl before we walk. So what do you think about this? Tablets for the little ones, Chromebooks for elementary school and up, and then a sprinkling of media desktops for kids. What do you think about that?
Kind of what we have in place, at least at the elementary level. K through 2nd have iPads, and then is it 2nd to 5th have Chromebooks? Yeah, I think K and 1st have iPads, and 2nd grade through 5th have Chromebooks.
So do you agree with that? Do you think that that's a good setting? I mean, you've been supporting this environment now this year and in previous years. Do you think that that's the best? Are iPads best for little ones and then Chromebooks better for as they get older? Do you agree with that, or do you have different thoughts?
I do. K and 1 don't really need a keyboard. Most of their use of technology is like interactive, but not in the sense where they're producing something, more like visiting RAS kids or other websites like that.
Yeah, they're like reinforcing basic skills. That was an idea that I had, is that you can kind of use tech in 2 different ways. I kind of feel like I'm always thinking in twos, right? One way you can use tech is to just do like the drill and kill, like use it for different applications to bolster your letter recognition, sight word spelling, simple math facts, right? So I think that's what you're talking about. That's what the little ones are doing with the iPads. Does that sound right?
Yeah, or playing games, the like instructional games.
Right. So there's that drill and kill, right? I'm taking those base skills and I'm working on them to make sure that we're building a foundation for learning. But then there's the more advanced stuff, which you tend to see in older grades, which is I'm writing a paper, I'm researching on the internet, I'm doing something that's a little bit more high end. And I do think that Chromebooks or laptops with keyboards tend to, I don't see typing going anywhere. There are some people that say that the keyboard is going to go away in a few years. But I don't know. I mean, the typewriter is super old, right? And the keyboard's just a newer definition of or a newer version of the typewriter. I just don't see the keyboards going away. So I kind of feel like that's an important thing that we should be teaching kids. Do you think that we should be incorporating typing into our teaching of students in the elementary school? And if so, what age? What grade should we start teaching that? What do you think?
I don't know what grade would be best, but definitely I feel like they should enter middle school having some basic skills on typing. So anywhere between 3rd to 5th would be fine, but they shouldn't be leaving elementary school without knowing
At least
even the basics.
I would agree. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, they should know how to use it well or properly.
Yeah, I think those basics, right? The foundations. I mean, I don't think we can expect, I mean, I'm not a great typist, right? And I'm an adult. So I think it's unrealistic to expect 5th graders to be like fully typing, but I think they should be introduced to it and then be at least comfortable with it so that once they get to middle school and they start, like if they go to Girls Prep Bronx Middle School, that's a one-to-one environment. So every student has a device. And if they really start to ramp up their tech use, where every day you're writing and you're submitting things online, then not being able to type is going to hold you back, right? Okay, so we've talked about student equipment, student gear, iPads, Chromebooks. It sounds like you all generally agree with my kind of layout. Although really, I think a key takeaway here for me, and this is my philosophy, and so I'm sharing it in this initial meeting, is that I really think we're doing our kids a big service if by the time they leave us in 8th grade, they have seen multiple types of technology. They've seen tablets, they've seen laptops, they've seen desktops, they've seen projectors, document cameras. They've interacted with these things, right? 3D. I'd love to get 3D printers and other things that kids have been able to interact with, and that's really. I saw that look. I saw that look. You guys don't like 3D printers? You think that's too much?
I think you should do it.
Yeah, this is the dreaming phase. We're supposed to be dreaming in these meetings. So I definitely want the student. I guess what I'm saying is that, and a lot of people in my position, they want to get one device because it's easier to support. Everybody has Chromebooks or everybody has iPads. It's just, and you guys know this too from being in ops. It's difficult. You have to put on a different brain almost to say, well, am I supporting this Apple TV? What do I know about that? How can I fix that? Oh, it's a Chromebook problem. Okay, how does that get managed, right? I mean, you know that that's difficult, as both of you have supported this in the past. But I'd rather us as the adults do the additional work and have multiple types of technology that the kids interact with, because when they get out of high school or get out of middle school and go into high school, or get out of high school and go to college and live their life, they're never just going to use one type of technology. They're going to use multiple types. So I think it's important for them to kind of have to think on their feet and learn different things with different technology forms. Do you agree with that or disagree with that?
I agree very much.
Okay, good. So that puts us all on the same page around student equipment. So now the last slide that I have here is around teacher and instructional gear. So if you flip back to the screen that showed my face, and now it'll show my presentation, now you should see a slide that I'm talking about around instructional gear. Do you see this slide?
Yes.
So there are only so many pieces of equipment that can really, at least in this day and age, that can go into the classroom and assist teachers instructing, right? A big one is those interactive surfaces. Your particular school has smart boards. Other schools have Eno boards. Other schools have interactive projectors, but they're all basically, they all accomplish the same task. And that's allowing students and teachers to interact with a projected image and to manipulate it, right? And then there's just regular projectors that basically allow teachers to present things, video and sound. Document cameras can be important for annotating, showing students something in the physical real world. And then lastly, this little section that I have there is on video and audio. We had conversations in earlier meetings around, teachers creating their own lessons and being able to record themselves. I'm also thinking at the middle school level for students and teachers both to be able to use video cameras to create documentaries, creating podcasts and maybe online radio stations, other ways to use technology to deliver instruction, but then also to have students use that technology to create. So if we put on, or we look at this through the lens of teacher gear, am I missing anything? Do you think that we should prioritize something over something else? What are our thoughts on what teachers are using to teach with?
What do I take more from you? Can I see the chart again?
Oh, yeah, sure. No worries, no worries. Here. There you go. Can you see it?
Yeah. They use the interactive surfaces and projectors regularly. Document cameras are beginning to increase in use, but we don't have very many available. We have older models that are pretty big and not as portable as a newer Elmo model we have, but we only have one working model of that Elmo. It's very small and easy to carry. Some teachers have expressed interest in having one stay in their classroom permanently, but they're not all that cheap. And again, we only have one working model of those smaller ones available for the entire school. Audio, they request speakers all the time. The swivel is really popular.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. I forgot to update my sheet with that. That's a good point.
Mm-hmm. iPads, because not every teacher, only like homeroom teachers get iPads for their students, but science teachers and specialists don't really have one. So when
you're saying iPads for staff. Mm-hmm. What do the staff use those for currently?
Recording themselves.
Oh, I see. So they use them for the swivel torch?
Sometimes, yes. Other times they use it with the girls. I'm not sure how. They're probably visiting online resources we have available, such as Brain Pop or one of our Learning A to Z or Follett Shelf.
I got you. So I had a question about the document cameras, though, because I think I talked to Patricia, the DCA at your school, around, you have Apple TVs in every classroom. Is that correct?
No. We have,
you have them in most classrooms, or what's the breakdown?
We have an Apple TV set up in every K and first grade class. And then we have one set up in one of our science classrooms because she requested it. All the others live in the office and they're available as loaners, but they're not really used.
So the reason why I see. So the reason why I'm asking is because I know that document cameras can be very expensive. And really, if you have an Apple TV, which they've lowered the price now to about $70, and you have an iPad, which we have several iPads at the school, you connect the Apple TV to the projector and then broadcast from an iPad to the Apple TV, and you can somehow they sell stands that you can put the iPad on that's 2 feet or something above the desk, and then it essentially becomes a document camera.
Right.
So that's a thought. That's one way to kind of solve the issue of a teacher wanting an all the time document camera. The scenario that I just described doesn't 100% fulfill the document camera model. because document cameras can, a lot of times they can like take time-lapse photos, although, I mean, iPads can take time-lapse photos too. There's a couple other bells and whistles that document cameras have that the iPad and the stand and the Apple TV might not have. But in my experience, the vast majority of teachers use document cameras just to annotate, right? They'll have a piece of paper underneath it and they're showing the kids how to take notes, or they're showing them how to highlight, or they're showing them what they did on a piece of paper. And so if really all you're using it for is a camera to show what's happening on a piece of paper, I would say that the Apple TV, iPad, and stand would be a much cheaper and longer term solution than a document camera. So keep that in mind as you're moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
So we're coming up here on the end of our time, and I just want to kind of close out here in talking about a few ops specific things. Are you okay to for the last 5 minutes here until 1? Is that okay, ladies?
Yes.
Okay, I really appreciate your time, by the way. Thank you. So one of the things that I did not talk about in my other meetings, because I had primarily instructional folks, is I didn't talk about what type of back-end equipment we have in place and the support structures we have in place, and then something that is referred to as a equipment replacement cycle. So we have just spent the past 2 years replacing all of our network infrastructure. These are our servers, switches, wireless access points, wiring, and then our support, which we've got some dedicated technicians from the technology vendor we currently use. They're on site about 3 to 4 times as much as they were last year. Do we see any, on the ground at the schools, are you seeing any increased performance from the changeover of these servers, the changeover of these WAPs? And both of you have been in the school for multiple years. Do you see a difference in technology performance on the ground now as opposed to 2 or 3 years ago? It's okay for the answer to be no. I'm not looking for the answer to be one way or the other. This is something that I don't normally talk about with teachers, but I wanted to highlight that we have had a lot of work done, and I'm curious if you're seeing any difference on the ground.
It's hard to say because I'm supporting in technology differently than I was back then. So back then, I really wasn't involved with technology aside from my own laptop, you know? Now,
What about your own use, though? Do you feel that it's better now just by your own usage as it was previously?
Outside once a week.
Yeah.
It's very helpful.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I think I cut you off. Would you mind saying that one more time?
No, it's really helpful to have on-site once a week, and not having to wait 2 or 3 weeks for another on-site visits, because there are things that they're not able to fix, like wirelessly. Yeah. So
do you think that we should continue to have on-site people, and should we have, and if so, what frequency should those people be visiting the schools?
I'm not sure what the tech needs are in other school. Here, minimum weekly, I would say, because so many things can go wrong with tech. You know, we're the biggest school, the most staff, and every classroom is set up to use some kind of technology.
So you agree, or you think that there should be someone on site? What I'm getting at is there are lots of companies that offer remote support, and our current company is one of them. But we increased our on-site presence based on feedback. So it sounds like that if we were to change vendors next year, or we were to do something differently, if we were to internalize it ourselves, let's say, your recommendation is that we still provide on-site techs, and at your campus, that should be at least once a week. Is that right?
Needed, because even though we're able to call in and email Mindshift, sometimes the time that you need to be with them on the phone or waiting for an email, a follow-up email, you just don't have it throughout the day. You can be on the phone for an hour just watching them work on your laptop.
And that would be better if you could hand that laptop off to someone and have them work on it for an hour away from you so you could go do other things. That's the thought process?
Thing though, right? Like you don't want to, I feel like you don't want to take that responsibility completely off the person, right? Like I think the idea the last few years has been to somehow want and have a good understanding of like how their laptop works, something very simple, and like try these things before you reach out to ops, and try these things before you reach out to Mindshift. So absolutely yes, like the support should be available, but like you're not handing over your laptop for like any minimal thing. Like you're gonna of course try from your end and do all that good stuff first. I think that the reason why it's gotten better, one of the reasons why it's gotten better, is because we all have a better idea of how our technology works, because people have taken the time to like actually sit and explain to us how technology works. I don't work with technology as much as Mirham does, but I have a better understanding of it now, not just because I'm in ops, but because we've had Mindshift around to say, okay, the next time this happens, try this.
Yeah, and most of the times it's as simple as, did you restart your computer? Well, no, I haven't done so in like 3 weeks.
Or do you update?
do
Do you shut down? Just very simple things.
But most of the time also when Mindshift is on site and you hand them over your laptop, it doesn't take them an hour to fix it. It could be something that's correct in like 10 minutes, but when they're doing it remotely, you're waiting, you're on hold.
You have to
They're trying different things, probably redoing what you already tried before calling them.
Yeah.
So it's just time consuming.
I hear you. So let me say that back so I make sure that I understand it. It sounds like that it's more efficient when we have people on site. And I think it also goes to like the relationship. Like when you know the people that are going to be on site, then it just helps to make you feel more comfortable about getting your problem solved. But then something else that Yvette said that I think is really interesting is training, even if that's kind of informal training, right? More experience you have with dealing with those problems, whether it be on the operations staff or if it's teachers in general, the more you train folks on how their technology works, then the more comfortable they are with it, and ultimately the faster their problems can be solved, or they could potentially solve their issues themselves. Does that sound right?
Mm-hmm. And that's something actually that's really exciting about having Lauren on site, and I hope it's something that increases. I guess because it's still pretty new or early on in the year. Teachers are still getting comfortable with having her around or familiar with her services, but I would love to see her work with staff and particularly instructional staff on how to like more engaging, more just maybe even short workshops on
like professional development training sessions that would happen on, I think you guys have PD days on Friday. Is that right?
Yeah.
Or maybe even during like their lunch, a lunch and learn.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Do this. So it'll be cool if we can see like different workshops or lunch and learn scheduled throughout the year or the remaining portion of the year with her teaching teachers how to use different technology.
That's a great idea.
But, whatever we have available in the school.
That's a great idea. It's just so you two know that is in the works. I'm working with Lauren and Patricia to put Lauren on the PD calendar and then also to offer other kind of one-off sessions. So that's a fantastic idea. But what I'm hearing from you too is that having a technology instructional coach is important, and you think that that's something that should continue obviously throughout this year, but then potentially into future years. Is that right? You think that's a valuable position and we should have that at the school?
Of course, technology is expensive. And teachers know that. So if they don't feel comfortable handling a device, they're probably going to be discouraged from using it or even learning how to use it unless someone's teaching them.
I think that's a very wise statement. So that's something that we'll include as we look to move forward. So well, we're over our time, so I want to be respectful. If you're watching this video, please feel free to post a comment underneath. I'm very happy to hear any and all thoughts on this. I want to take a moment to thank Yvette and Mirham for joining me today. So thank you so much, ladies, for giving me the ops perspective. And you guys are very hardworking coworkers that I appreciate your thoughts and opinions. So thank you very much. I appreciate you joining.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
All right. Enjoy your weekend. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.